Greetings all, my name is Dominic from the Comic Book Report YouTube channel, here to do a guest review for Organic Priced Books. And today I can't wait to talk to you about Superman Birthright Deluxe Edition from Mark Waid. This is another Superman origin retelling, but it's one of my personal favorites. I've read it once or twice over the years, but rereading it in this deluxe oversized edition, it was just so much fun to revisit. I will start by saying this edition before you is the direct market cover. There is also a standard edition cover for this Superman Birthright Deluxe edition. I'll be sure to include a little picture of that so you can compare. I personally prefer the direct market cover. I think you get a lot more details. I like some of the other characters and kind of the alien feel of it. At any rate, two fantastic covers for a great collection. And while we begin to take a look at more of the exteriors of this book, I will just give you a couple facts about this collection. The issues in this volume were written by Mark Waid and illustrated by Leinil Francis Yu. The issues in this volume were published by DC Comics beginning in 2003. The volume itself collects Superman Birthright issues 1 through 12. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover collection that is 304 pages. I will say the paper stock they use is a matte paper stock, and the binding you'll see is a glued binding, which I will show you in a moment. I also wanted to note on the back cover here that Superman logo is kind of a different texture than the rest of that hardcover just dust jacket, so it kind of feels like it stands out on the back cover a little bit, and I really loved it. Just a really fun little touch that makes this dust jacket just extra special. And speaking of that dust jacket, I'll go ahead and remove it so you can get one final look at the dust jacket before showing you the under the dust jacket artwork we're treated to on this deluxe edition collection. When you spread the dust jacket out, you'll actually see that it is sort of wraparound artwork, which is just such an immersive, cool feature to this dust jacket. Not every collection is like that, and I just think it was really well designed, especially this direct market cover. As far as the under the dust jacket art itself, we're just treated to a nice picture of Superman that is also wraparound, which is really fun. We have the title on the spine. Overall, just a really fantastic book layout. And once I show you all the sides here, I will go ahead and spread out that just hardback book so you can take a look at that under the dust jacket art in all of its wraparound glory. Like I said, I think a lot of love did go into this collection. It's nice to see this collected in a deluxe edition. However, I would have personally preferred sewn binding and glossy print pages. I know the trade paperback did include glossy pages, so I'm a little mystified that DC again chose to do matte paper. I know some collectors do prefer this, feeling like it's a little more authentic, kind of newsprint feel. And I will say DC lately has had amazing matte paper stock. I think that the actual prints turn out really gorgeous. You don't even get as much glare when you film it or when you're reading it. However, I personally as a collector do prefer that glossy print, so I hope to see more of that from DC in the future. And now that you've seen the glued binding, I will go ahead and do a comparison between this deluxe edition and the older trade paperback collection I had. Like I said, it's obviously oversized. It's about as tall as an omnibus, which is exciting. I love how those line up on a bookcase. And again, it's really great to have an oversized hardcover. I just would have preferred glossy print, like I said again. But overall, not a ton of complaints. I'll show you also a comparison here of the print quality. Again, I think the glossy print just pops a little bit more, but this deluxe edition certainly has a great and faithful reproduction as well. And with all this out of the way, we can actually dive into the collection itself. This book has amazing end pages with this beautiful kind of starry space sky designed. There's also little books like that marking between issues sometimes. Just some really beautiful design work went into this book. No real complaints, again, other than the paper stock and the binding preference. But again, DC's been doing this a lot lately, and so it's nothing different than what we've been seeing from a lot of these deluxe editions recently. And I'm just really happy to have it oversized in hardcover. Now that we've talked so much about the book's design and format and specifications, moving ahead to the actual story and the art itself, I will again say this is one of my favorite retellings of the Superman origin story. Superman Birthright really picks up at the destruction of Krypton, where Jor-El and Laura, ship little Kal-El, little baby Superman. They jettison him off of their dying world in the hopes that he will survive on another planet, of course being Earth, landing in Smallville, Kansas, and taken in by the Kents. This is a quintessential Superman story. I've really loved it. I think one of the things that set this apart for me is this feels very comparable to what you see in like the Smallville TV series for fans of that. I know I was a big fan. We have elements in this book like Clark and Lex as kids being friends in Smallville. We have elements of like his relationship with the Kents and Smallville and trying to keep his identity sort of a secret for a long time. So I see a lot of influences there, and I do like that approach. I think it was very fun. Again, as far as the narrative goes, we start with Krypton and sort of the dying of that planet and the saving of Clark. And then from there, we actually fast forward to where Clark is now a young man, and he's off kind of gallivanting around the world, trying to find his place, his role, what to do. He has sort of a news reporter already bent, trying to find these just different things around the globe. We have a really large little story here for an issue or two in Africa, where he's kind of getting to know these kind of tribal leaders and, you know, these figures that are trying to make a democratic sort of society within this subgroup in Africa. And he kind of gets involved, and there's violence, and we see some of his super heroics. And again, that almost to me, this era where he's kind of in the world finding himself, it did remind me a little bit of Man of Steel, that film from a few years back where he's just trying to find his way in the world. And I really like that, trying to figure out who he is before the cape and tights. And I did like that aspect of it. I feel like you really get to know the character of Clark Kent before he ever becomes Superman, or, you know, Clark Kent is Superman or what have you. And so I really liked it. Like I said, this is familiar territory. There's been so many retellings of Superman's origin story, but I think that this is still a really novel one that really captures a lot of heart behind this character, and it really is a character study on Clark Kent, and I love that. It's not as much about the superheroics as it is about Clark Kent and him figuring out who he is. You know, the title Birthright kind of has this idea too of like, what is his nature? Where does he come from? What is his legacy or inheritance? What is his human legacy? What is his Kryptonian legacy? Because he doesn't really know, other than the fact that he's from space. He doesn't know much about his people. He has this sort of digital like tablet thing that has all this Kryptonian stuff on it, but he can't decipher it. He can't always make heads or tails of it, and he just has little inklings about his home world and society. But he feels drawn to that. He feels called to it. He feels like he has to understand that part of himself to understand his place in the world and his function and who he ought to be. In the pages of this mini-series, we also have him, you know, arriving in Metropolis, finding his job at the Daily Planet. We have him meeting characters like Perry White and Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, all just incredible legacy supporting characters from his whole mythos and world, and I really like seeing their interpretations in this series. I think Lois particularly is depicted just marvelously. We see her gumption, her drive, her just general grit and persona that is so larger than life, and they just capture it really well, in my opinion, in this book. And I really enjoyed seeing that. I also liked seeing his relationship with his parents, John and Martha Kent. I really did love that. I do think a standout is that Lex Luthor-Clark Kent relationship, especially the flashback sequences in Smallville. Up until this point, I had not read a ton of stories that had them being acquaintances or friends in the past. I remember when I first watched the Smallville television series when that premiered years ago now, being just captured by this notion that, hey, they could have been buddies, or this is an incarnation where they were friends and then they kind of turned on each other. And so I like seeing that displayed and just portrayed in this comic as well. I do think it's really fun to see that these arch nemeses kind of, you know, had this point of friendship and had this kernel before they ever made, you know, a name for themselves as, like, you know, industrialist and just genius Lex Luthor or Superman. I will say the relationship is a lot different than Smallville. The characterizations of the characters are also quite a bit different, but I really did like it. I think one of my favorite issues in this whole book is actually the backstory of what caused the rift between Lex Luthor and Clark Kent. I just think it's really interesting, and it does kind of leave you wondering, does Lex know that Superman is Clark Kent? Does he suspect? Can he not allow himself to understand that? Just some really interesting stories here. I think overall the through line is that this is a Superman origin story, and this is a Lex Luthor versus Superman story. But it's, again, done in such a way that it's extremely character driven. We really understand a lot of the motivations. It's also a coming of age story, which I do love seeing for Superman as well. it's hard not to just enjoy it. There's a lot of hope here. There's a lot of just perseverance and growth and character development. And I think that it's just a really good story. I love what they do thematically through this. There's a lot about just fathers and sons and legacy, like I mentioned earlier. Everything kind of feeds into that title, Birthright. Like, what is your role to play? Where do you come from? What are you supposed to be doing? What is your place? What is your legacy? And I think that we see so much of that here at the foundation of this character, Superman, and I just think it's really well done. Mark Waid is definitely a very prolific author, and he's authored some of my favorite comic books of all time, and this is no exception. I think that this is Waid at some of his very best. And as far as the main artist on the book, Leinil Francis Yu, we've seen them sort of, do a lot of great art in the past as well, and this is another great book of theirs. One thing I really enjoy is I feel like the character models all look very distinctive, and there's this level of detail in the artwork that I feel like the sense of place and the sense of props and everything in all of the panels, it just is really immersive. I feel like I really understand the world they create, and even like the issue that is in Africa next to the issue in Metropolis, next to the issue in Smallville. Again, it's just a really good sense of place. We get a lot of just dynamic artwork. We have stuff set in the history in that first issue in Krypton, and just the alienness of it all. I just think this artist really faithfully adapts all of these different ideas in such a way that you feel very immersed and you feel very distinctive from scene to scene to scene, and I really enjoyed that. The character models are all, really detailed as well. There is a kind of, I don't know how to describe it, there is a lot of character in the face. I think that there's not a ton of smoothness to some of the character models. There is some hard edges and detail work that makes some of the images just really striking. Like when Superman's deflecting all the bullets or using his heat vision, some of the design work for it is almost frightening, and I really liked that. I really feel like their depiction of Superman himself was very imposing. Like, I really felt like I understood the gravity of Superman's power in this artwork. And I feel like some incarnations and artists that do Superman, they have more of a smooth touch or a kind of more like levity to how they draw the Superman character, where he's sort of this regal, almost on a pedestal kind of figure. And I feel like this incarnation of Superman had much more, again, kind of like Lois, like a grit to him, and you feel that just sense of power kind of emanating from the character design. Really, really well done. At any rate, this story has a lot of fun twists and turns, and I'll save the resolution and some of the other story specifics for your own personal reads. But this is Superman Birthright, the Deluxe Edition. The collection itself ends with some cool extras, which I really enjoyed as well. And overall, this was just really well made. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like a full, more spoiler-heavy review, you can go ahead and start following my channel. I'll probably release a video on this as well, in another week or so here. But at any rate, I hope when you go to think about buying this book and any other collected editions in print right now, that you first check out Organic Price Books. Thank you so much for watching this video on Superman Birthright, the Deluxe Edition. And until next time, have a good one.